Lewis Hamilton has just made a surprising announcement on Instagram. He's leaving Ferrari. Is this the beginning of his retirement, or is a new chapter with a different team about to begin? Watch until the end. The truth behind Hamilton's unexpected future will leave you speechless. Subscribe only if you want to stay updated with the latest breaking news about F1 races. Lewis Hamilton has just unleashed a chain reaction across the entire motorsport universe, leaving fans, teams, and analysts stunned, speechless, and scrambling to process what might be the most emotionally charged and disruptive announcement in recent Formula One history. Without prior notice, press leaks, or cryptic teases, the British driver who has redefined greatness in modern racing took to his personal Instagram account and dropped a message that detonated like a bombshell. He's walking away from Scuderia Ferrari, effective immediately, without negotiation, without ceremony, and with a fire in his words that cannot be ignored. The image he posted was devoid of any brand affiliation or visual noise, just stark, black background with simple white text, centered, unflinching, impossible to misinterpret. "I gave it everything, but I can't continue like this." That sentence, those 11 words, have already been translated into dozens of languages, plastered across headlines, and dissected by every corner of the racing world. But what came after that initial line was something far more powerful: a personal manifesto, an emotional outpouring, and a final declaration from a man pushed to his breaking point. What Hamilton wrote in the caption wasn't a goodbye, it was a scream from the heart. He opened up about the reality behind the legendary red overalls, what it truly felt like behind the scenes at Maranello, beyond the cameras and PR smiles. He spoke of a system that didn't embrace him, but rather suffocated his identity. According to Hamilton, Ferrari had become a place of mental exhaustion, where trust eroded over time, and respect gave way to manipulation. He described a working atmosphere that wasn't challenging in the way that pushes athletes to achieve greatness, but rather draining, emotionally corrosive, and mentally destabilizing. He didn't mince words. In a move few expected, Hamilton specifically called out Frédéric Vasseur, the team principal, as a driving force behind the ongoing turmoil. He accused him of fostering an environment built not on growth or unity, but on fear, micromanagement, and targeted pressure designed to demoralize rather than motivate. He explained that the expectations placed on him weren't about chasing success, but about controlling narrative, applying blame, and constantly shifting goalposts to protect internal agendas. Subscribe only if you want to stay updated with the latest breaking news about F1 races. The message conveyed a level of emotional fatigue rarely seen in public-facing sports figures of Hamilton's caliber. He reflected on being consistently marginalized during critical decision-making processes, races where his strategic preferences were overridden without justification, meetings where his insights were dismissed, and situations where he felt used more for image than impact. He said that no matter how hard he tried to bring experience, leadership, and vision into the equation, it always felt like he was running up a steep hill with someone quietly loosening his footing from behind. And then came the section that no one could have predicted he would make public. He addressed, for the first time in clear, unequivocal terms, the deep fracture in his professional relationship with Charles Leclerc, his own teammate, the man he once praised as one of the most talented drivers of his generation. While avoiding direct insults or overt blame, Hamilton painted a picture of a divided garage, a workplace where trust had been replaced by suspicion, and where collaboration slowly disintegrated into silent competition. He hinted at a culture of preferential treatment and subtle undermining that built up over months until it became unbearable. He wrote of being excluded from crucial debriefs, of data being shared unequally, of technical choices being made that seemed to serve only one side of the garage. He described feeling like an intruder in meetings where the conclusions were already drawn before he even arrived. And while he never accused Leclerc of orchestrating this environment, the subtext of betrayal was impossible to miss. He wrote, "It's hard to compete when the rules keep changing, when the table keeps shifting, but only on your side of the room." Those who follow Formula One closely have long whispered about unease within the Ferrari camp, but no one expected confirmation to come like this, from Hamilton himself, unfiltered, with zero restraint. He didn't veil the dysfunction behind polite diplomacy. He revealed it with raw vulnerability and fearless authenticity. His words struck a nerve, not just because of who he is, but because of how rare it is for someone at that level to speak with such transparency. Reports from within the team are already emerging, painting a portrait of disarray. One engineer, speaking off the record, confirmed that the garage has felt increasingly divided since mid-season. Another hinted that Hamilton's technical recommendations were often overridden without clear explanation, and that trust between driver and strategist had broken down completely. Whispers suggest that a series of private confrontations escalated during the summer break, culminating in heated arguments following disappointing race results, particularly after controversial calls that benefited Leclerc at Hamilton's expense. One pivotal moment that insiders keep returning to is the post-race tension after the Monaco Grand Prix, where Hamilton was visibly frustrated and Leclerc emerged victorious. Sources claim that Hamilton left the team debrief early, slammed his telemetry folder shut, and told a colleague, "I didn't come here to be a number 2 in disguise." That single sentence might encapsulate everything that has gone wrong between him and the team. Subscribe only if you want to stay updated with the latest breaking news about F1 races. Since the Instagram post went live, social media has exploded. Hashtags related to Hamilton's exit have trended globally. Ferrari's own channels have gone dark, with no statements released and no representatives available for comment. Meanwhile, Charles Leclerc's silence is being interpreted by fans and media as either shock or guilt, or both. Sponsors are reportedly demanding urgent clarifications, and journalists are already digging for answers as to whether Ferrari knew this announcement was coming or if it blindsided even the upper management. Behind closed doors, the political damage is mounting. This is not just a resignation, it's an exposé. Hamilton didn't just walk away, he held up a mirror to the sport, to Ferrari, and to every team that claims to honor its drivers while quietly eroding them from within. He reminded the world that behind the fame and fortune, there is still a person wearing the helmet, one with limits, dignity, and the right to walk away from dysfunction. Other teams have wasted no time responding. While Hamilton gave no indication about his next destination, speculation is now spreading like wildfire. Could Mercedes offer a second reunion? Will Audi accelerate its Formula One project to recruit the most marketable driver on the planet? Might Aston Martin try to pair Hamilton with Fernando Alonso, creating an all-star team of legends? Or could this mean a temporary hiatus from the sport altogether, one born out of exhaustion and disillusionment rather than opportunity? Regardless of where he goes, or if he goes anywhere at all, one thing is certain, this moment will live forever. Hamilton's decision to speak this openly, this boldly, and this emotionally, is more than a career move. It is a cultural shift. It breaks the unspoken rule of silence, the notion that grievances must stay internal, that giants should suffer quietly. Instead, he told the truth. His truth. And in doing so, he forced an entire industry to confront the question, what kind of environment are we building for our heroes? As for Ferrari, the fallout has only just begun. Trust has been shattered. Image has been tarnished. And while the team will likely regroup, hire replacements, and craft statements full of poise and control, the shadow of this day will loom for a long time. The red suit will never look quite the same again. Not after this. Hamilton's closing words echo with a resonance far deeper than racing. I thought I was chasing history, but I was running for myself. I gave you everything I had. But now I take back what's mine, my voice, my peace, and my freedom. And with that, he disappears, not defeated, but liberated. Lewis Hamilton didn't filter his emotions. His words cut deeply, not out of anger, but from the exhaustion of holding back for too long. In a world where diplomacy is often preferred over honesty, he chose to speak openly, shedding the polished surface that Formula One expects from its legends. He didn't just question Charles Leclerc's behavior, he dismantled it. His accusation wasn't about a single incident, it was about months of quiet neglect, of emotional absence, of a teammate who, instead of offering support, turned into a stranger during the hardest moments of the season. An authentic teammate stands with you in difficult times, he explained. But Charles looked away every single time. When I needed unity, his silence was deafening. Hamilton's frustration wasn't fabricated, it was built on experience. He described a growing distance inside Ferrari, a sense that the walls were slowly closing in after the Monaco Grand Prix, a race that should have brought clarity but instead exposed hidden fractures. On the surface, the team made a strategy call. But beneath that, Lewis saw something more calculated, an intentional shift in focus, one that prioritized Leclerc at the cost of fairness. It wasn't simply about who pitted first or who got the better tire compound, it was about trust. It was about a feeling that Ferrari had quietly decided to put their resources, their faith, and their future behind one man, and that man wasn't him. But beyond the analysis and beyond the headlines, there was a scene that no broadcast showed. No camera caught it. No commentator mentioned it. After the post-race press conference, as Hamilton walked slowly through the tight corridors of the paddock, those nearby noticed something unusual. He wasn't rushing. His suit was half-zipped, his gloves still on, his expression blank. He looked like someone who had fought a battle not just against lap times or strategy, but against being forgotten, overlooked, erased. Then came a moment of stillness. Frédéric Vasseur, the very man who had welcomed Hamilton into the Ferrari family with open arms and big promises, appeared from around the corner. Their eyes met, and for a long second, no one moved. What happened next wasn't a confrontation. It was colder than that. It was an emotional standoff. Witnesses described the air between them as so thick it was hard to breathe. Vasseur said a few words under his breath. Hamilton listened, then gave a slow nod, not in agreement, but in finality. It was the kind of nod that said, "I understand exactly where I stand now." He turned and walked away, without raising his voice, without even looking back. Vasseur remained frozen, arms crossed, eyes down, as if he too understood something had permanently changed. Those who work within the team have started whispering about the divide. Not just between Hamilton and Leclerc, but between Hamilton and the organization that once promised to build its future around him. Engineers talk about briefings where Lewis's input wasn't taken seriously, about development meetings where upgrades were discussed in a way that suited Leclerc's preferences, not Hamilton's feedback. Mechanics noticed a difference in how data was shared, in how the cars were prepared, in how much influence Hamilton had compared to the beginning of the year. He had gone from being a celebrated arrival to someone whose voice echoed without response. And then there's Leclerc. The driver once viewed as calm, humble, and team-oriented, is now, according to insiders, fiercely protective of his place. Some say his confidence has evolved into quiet arrogance. Others suggest he's simply doing what anyone would do in his position, defending his territory. Regardless, the chemistry between him and Hamilton has completely dissolved. Their body language tells the story. They don't make eye contact in the garage. They pass each other like strangers. One celebrates while the other walks away. There is no connection left, only a cold professionalism. This was supposed to be Ferrari's dream duo, the experienced champion and the homegrown star. Instead, it has become a silent battle, with tension so thick it drips from every radio call, every strategy decision, every interaction. There are no explosive arguments, just a chilling absence of trust. Even the fans are starting to notice. The atmosphere in the Ferrari garage feels split, with crew members subconsciously choosing sides. One side leans toward the familiar, the younger driver who's been there for years. The other watches quietly as the most accomplished driver in the sport's history slowly loses his influence, despite still delivering on track. Behind all of this is Hamilton's quiet determination not to be erased. His public words are not a rant, they're a reminder. A reminder that he came to Ferrari not to play a supporting role, but to rewrite history. And yet, slowly, decision by decision, conversation by conversation, he has felt that mission being taken from him. He no longer wants to smile for photos and pretend everything is fine. He no longer accepts silence as the price of inclusion. He wants fairness. He wants honesty. He wants the truth acknowledged, not hidden beneath layers of PR statements and social media filters. Fans are torn. Some believe Hamilton is justified, that he's exposing a team culture that prioritizes image over integrity. Others see him as creating drama, of destabilizing a team that's already struggling. But what no one can deny is that his voice is powerful. When he speaks, the entire motorsport world listens. And what he's saying now is louder than ever. He will not let this team, or this sport, forget who he is or what he stands for. He isn't angry, he's disappointed. He isn't bitter, he's tired. And yet, despite the setbacks, there's still a fire in him. A desire to race. A desire to fight. A desire to make sure that the ending of his career isn't written by those who don't understand what he's given to this sport. Whether he stays at Ferrari, moves elsewhere, or even walks away, he has made one thing clear: he won't be silenced. Not by teammates, not by team principles, not by narratives designed to push him into the shadows. He's still here. And as long as he's here, his story will be told his way. The room was heavy before a single word was spoken, as if the very air understood the weight of what was about to unfold. No shouting. No slamming of fists or raised voices. Just a piercing, loaded silence that seemed to pull gravity toward the center of the room. It wasn't just another debrief. It was a reckoning. Lewis Hamilton stood before Frederick Vasseur, not as a subordinate, not as a statistic, but as a man teetering between disappointment and disillusionment. Vasseur, usually composed to the point of unreadability, now wore a face marked by tight restraint. There was no anger, just the kind of cool detachment that can wound more than rage ever could. He leaned slightly forward, his voice steady but stripped of empathy, and delivered a message that many described as a turning point. "You're complicating everything. With your background, we anticipated a different level of execution." To the casual observer, it may have sounded like constructive criticism. But to those familiar with the history, Hamilton's storied legacy, his championship pedigree, the years of dominance, those words rang with implication. Not just a critique of performance, but a subtle erosion of respect. Hamilton didn't respond instantly. He stood firm, absorbing the comment like a man who had heard it all before but never expected it here, not in the team he had sacrificed so much to join. His reply, when it came, wasn't defensive. It was devastating in its clarity. "You demand greatness," he said slowly, eyes fixed on Vasseur, "but give back very little. Little in respect. Little in backing. Even less in solidarity." The sentence lingered. It wasn't delivered with spite, but with an honesty that burned. Around them, mechanics paused, engineers looked down, and assistants pretended not to hear what they absolutely could. Someone later described it as the moment everything shifted. There was no coming back. Not from that. And then, as if destiny wanted to put an exclamation point on the unraveling, Charles Leclerc entered the scene. Unplanned. Unscripted. The hallway that moments before had been charged with tension now felt like it might explode. No one spoke. Every glance was fixed on what was about to transpire between the two drivers, a duo that had once been branded as Ferrari's dream pairing, now slowly spiraling into dysfunction. Hamilton, despite the emotional exhaustion painted across his face, extended his hand. It was a quiet gesture, but not without meaning. Perhaps it was a last attempt to maintain some level of decency, or simply a signal that, despite everything, respect still mattered. It wasn't grand. It wasn't dramatic. But it was genuine. Leclerc, however, didn't even falter. His eyes remained forward, posture rigid, his pace unbroken. He passed Hamilton without so much as a glance, making it painfully clear where the relationship now stood. That small, wordless moment resonated louder than any heated argument ever could. And though there was no camera to record it, the witnesses would recount it for weeks, maybe years. The silence that followed was deafening. Hamilton's expression didn't change, but his next words did more damage than any outburst could. Turning to Vasseur with a tired smile that barely masked the pain beneath, he muttered, "There's your chosen one. I hope he gives you what I never could." Those within earshot felt the impact instantly. It wasn't just a jab, it was a full dissection of Ferrari's internal politics. The message was unmistakable. Despite all his experience, his achievements, and the hope that he could lead Ferrari into a new era, Hamilton was never truly embraced. He was respected in press releases, applauded during unveilings, celebrated by fans, but behind the scenes, he had always felt like the outsider. The second priority. The veteran brought in to elevate, but never really supported. After that moment, nothing returned to normal. Meetings were held, strategies revised, but the energy in the paddock had changed permanently. Technicians no longer joked during warm-ups. Engineers grew cautious during briefings. Conversations between Hamilton and the team grew shorter, less transparent, more transactional. Collaboration faded. Trust eroded. The heartbeat of the team was no longer in sync. Leclerc, meanwhile, appeared increasingly isolated himself, perhaps realizing that in winning the internal power struggle, he had also inherited its pressure. The dynamic between the two drivers deteriorated further. Pittsburgh lane interactions became colder. Glances exchanged across the garage were empty, devoid of acknowledgement. Every Sunday became a showcase not of unity, but of silent warfare. The garage split itself into invisible factions. Some mechanics quietly favored Lewis, recognizing the sacrifices he had made and the class with which he carried himself, even amid tension. Others stood behind Leclerc, the young driver they'd nurtured, the face of the future. But the divide was real, and it was growing. Hamilton, for all his restraint, was visibly wearier with every passing race. Not in his driving. His performance remained polished, precise, but in the small moments, the curt nods during driver meetings, the lack of small talk, the way he left the paddock without lingering. The joy was gone. The ambition remained, but it was no longer rooted in partnership. It was survival. A desire to leave on his own terms, not broken but unbent. The media sensed something was wrong. Rumors swirled. Headlines speculated. Pundits pointed out that while Ferrari kept emphasizing a united front, their on-track execution showed otherwise. Radio messages were short, often void of emotion. Strategy calls seemed hesitant, even conflicting. The spark that had once fueled hope for a Hamilton-Leclerc super team had burned out, replaced by skepticism, resentment, and unspoken regret. Inside Maranello, the walls echoed with whispers. The dream had soured. What began as a bold new chapter had unraveled into a narrative of tension, misalignment, and unmet expectations. The promise of legacy had been replaced by a story of division. And for Hamilton, it wasn't just a team falling apart, it was a vision collapsing in real time. Those closest to him say he kept a notebook during that period. Not for telemetry or data, but to write down feelings, observations, moments that mattered. A personal log of everything that had gone right, and everything that had gone wrong. In one entry, reportedly written after that silent handshake snub, he simply wrote, "Sometimes you give your heart to something that was never built to hold it." And that says everything. Hamilton didn't return to the motorhome like a man finishing a routine day at the track. He moved like someone carrying an invisible weight, dragging behind him the ghosts of 1,000 unspoken moments. His steps were slow, almost hesitant, as though every inch forward was resisted by something buried deep within. He didn't speak. He didn't wave. His eyes remained fixed on the ground, vacant and heavy. There was no fire in his demeanor, no trace of the fierce competitor who once captivated entire continents. What remained was a man cloaked in silence, disconnected from everything around him. The usual buzz of team activity surrounding the paddock faded into hushed observation as crew members noticed him approaching. His presence didn't ignite the usual energy. Instead, it quieted the entire area. Engineers froze mid-discussion. Mechanics paused as they packed away gear. Even the media, usually relentless in their pursuit of a post-race quote, instinctively knew to keep their distance. There was something solemn in the air. Something sacred. Like watching a monument begin to crumble before your eyes. Hamilton didn't break stride as he climbed the steps of the motorhome and disappeared behind the tinted glass. The door shut firmly behind him, not slammed, not forced, but sealed with a finality that sent a chill through those watching. Inside, he moved straight to his personal chamber. Not the lounge. Not the debriefing zone. His own isolated sanctuary, designed for rest but now transformed into a refuge from the noise, from the expectations, from the crushing demand to always be unbreakable. Once inside, he engaged the lock. The silence that followed was absolute. No replies to knocks. No verbal acknowledgments. No visible signs of life. The room may have been soundproof, but the emotional echo of his disappearance reverberated throughout the entire Mercedes camp. It wasn't the first time Lewis had withdrawn after a difficult result. But this was different. This wasn't about a bad weekend or a missed opportunity. This felt deeper, sharper, like a final thread had snapped within him, and no one knew how to repair it. As the minutes crawled by, concern began to spread. Members of the technical crew whispered among themselves, unsure of whether to try again or give him more space. Several staff members attempted contact, knocking gently, leaving bottled water by the door, even sliding notes beneath the threshold. Nothing. No movement. No response. No sound of pacing or objects shifting. It was as if the room had swallowed him whole. As if time itself had paused behind that closed door. And then, unexpectedly, a presence arrived that no one had anticipated, Toto Wolff. He hadn't been expected at the garage at that point in the day. Officially, his responsibilities had concluded earlier with a sequence of brand meetings and hospitality appearances. Most assumed he had already departed the venue altogether. But he hadn't left. Not entirely. Toto had remained nearby, lingering in the background of Budapest, completing his obligations but never disconnecting from the pulse of the team. And when whispers reached him about Hamilton's disappearance into silence, he acted immediately. Without fanfare or warning, Toto entered the motorhome alone. There were no assistants flanking him, no PR staff clearing a path. Just a man who had once stood side by side with Lewis during their most dominant years, now stepping into a moment of emotional emergency. He moved with purpose, yet quietly, respecting the weight of the situation. When he arrived at the locked door, he didn't knock. He simply rested his hand against the wood and said, in a tone laced with something personal and unmistakably real, "It's me." There was a pause. 10 seconds. Perhaps a bit more. Then, the lock clicked, and the door eased open. What happened beyond that doorway remained sealed away from cameras and curious ears. No one captured it. No statements followed. But the accounts of those who were close to the situation have offered glimpses, brief, emotional flashes of what unfolded during those 45 minutes. It began with silence. Then a shared understanding. Then, for the first time in years, Hamilton cried. Not in rage. Not in performative agony. In truth. Quiet, exhausted tears that spoke of years of pressure, public scrutiny, private battles, and a growing sense of isolation in a sport he once ruled like a king. Toto didn't interrupt him. He didn't fill the air with empty phrases or managerial comfort. He let the silence hold them both. The weight of their shared history spoke volumes. Years of championships, of heartbreaks, of internal wars and external celebrations. And now, finally, of a reckoning neither of them had prepared for, but both seemed to accept. When Toto finally spoke, it wasn't to make a pitch. It wasn't to convince. It was to remind, to reflect, to return to the human beneath the legend. "You don't owe anyone anything," he reportedly said, voice low but unwavering. "Not the team. Not the fans. Not the legacy. You've given more than anyone ever should have. If you want to stop, we'll protect you. If you want to come back, even as a third driver, I'll make sure it's on your terms. With dignity. With peace." Hamilton didn't respond right away. He sat there, breathing slowly, hands resting in his lap. His eyes were red. His posture slumped. Not in defeat, but in release. Like someone finally allowing themselves to stop holding everything in. And when he did answer, it wasn't loud. It wasn't even fully audible to those standing outside. But the words were unforgettable to the few who caught them. That might be the first offer that didn't come with conditions. And that line, that whisper in the shadows of a fading Sunday, rippled through the walls of the motorhome like a heartbeat. It wasn't about contracts. It wasn't about the car's pace or the politics or the media narratives. It was about being seen. About finally feeling like the human behind the helmet was allowed to be vulnerable. To be uncertain. To be tired. When the two men emerged later, there was no announcement. No handshake for the cameras. They walked side by side, quiet but aligned. Something invisible had shifted. The staff sensed it. The team resumed their tasks with a little more care, a little more calm. Everyone knew something had broken, and something else, something essential, had begun to rebuild. Because in Formula One, a world obsessed with performance, numbers, data, optics, narratives, it's easy to forget that behind every helmet is a heart that bleeds. Behind every result is a soul wrestling with identity, legacy, and purpose. And on that day, behind a locked door in Budapest, two men met not as boss and driver, but as brothers in battle. And the connection they found in that silence may prove more powerful than any podium they've ever stood on together. The racing world has been thrust into a storm of disbelief, its very foundation shaken by a decision that not only stuns but rewrites the expectations of a generation. What began as hopeful collaboration between two giants, Lewis Hamilton and Ferrari, has come to a dramatic, almost poetic collapse. The sport, the fans, and the media are left reeling, trying to comprehend how such a monumental partnership, one that once inspired dreams and headlines, could unravel with such profound finality. Lewis Hamilton, the embodiment of modern racing excellence, the man whose name is etched into nearly every record book, has chosen to walk away, not just from a car or a contract, but from one of the most revered institutions in motorsport history. And the way he did it, utterly unfiltered, with clarity, with conviction, with the kind of authenticity that few dare to show in such a rigid, politically charged environment. His public statement wasn't a press release. It wasn't sanitized or processed through a team of lawyers or PR agents. It was a declaration of emotional truth, written in his own words, with a resonance that struck deep into the hearts of millions. He wrote, "They wanted me to be someone I'm not. They demanded flawlessness but rejected realness. They expected obedience rather than vision. That's never been my formula for success, and it won't be how I say goodbye." That message exploded across every digital platform imaginable. It wasn't merely read, it was felt. It spread like wildfire across social media, news channels, podcasts, group chats, and live discussions. Within moments, it had surpassed mere virality. It had become a cultural event. Analysts pored over every phrase. Fans compiled timelines. Influencers turned his words into mantras. And more than anything, people began to wonder, what on earth went so wrong behind closed doors in Maranello? Ferrari, for all its storied legacy and powerful symbolism, has been conspicuously silent. No official announcement. No attempt at damage control. Not even a vague corporate acknowledgement. The absence of any formal reaction has sparked a storm of speculation. Every pundit and insider with even a hint of access has begun theorizing about the fracture, what led to this rupture, who pushed too far, and where the tipping point truly lay. Some insiders claim that Lewis's insistence on speaking up for his values, on issues ranging from team dynamics to broader ethical concerns, was seen internally as disruptive. Others suggest that the engineering department resisted his feedback on development direction, leading to weeks of misalignment and mistrust. A few even whisper about deeper philosophical clashes with team leadership, where Hamilton's progressive, outspoken nature clashed with Ferrari's deeply traditional, hierarchical structure. There are also growing claims that Hamilton felt cornered, boxed into a role that celebrated his image but dismissed his influence. He wasn't merely frustrated with the car's inconsistencies or strategy failures. He was disillusioned with an environment that, in his view, valued compliance more than collaboration. What was billed as a dream alliance had become a creative and spiritual mismatch, suffocating rather than empowering. And now, amid the fallout, the question becomes, what next? Ferrari is already rumored to be contacting Carlos Sainz, whose departure had been all but confirmed months ago. In a stunning reversal, they are now reportedly hoping he will return, perhaps temporarily, perhaps longer. Parallel to that, the team is also evaluating whether to elevate one of their emerging prospects. Names like Behrman and Antonelli are being tossed around with increasing seriousness, despite the enormous pressure that would accompany such a move. Simultaneously, another narrative is quietly building momentum. In the background, Mercedes appears to be setting the stage for a potential reunion, not necessarily as a driver in active competition, but in a more symbolic, perhaps even strategic capacity. Whispers from within the Brackley headquarters suggest that the team is exploring the idea of Hamilton taking on an ambassadorial role, possibly working with junior drivers, helping shape long-term goals, or even spearheading their shift toward technological innovation and social responsibility. Toto Wolff, never one to speak recklessly, delivered a succinct but poignant message when asked about Lewis: "He'll always be part of our journey." That simple phrase has sparked a wave of emotional reactions, as fans and journalists alike try to decipher what that return might look like. Could this be the beginning of a second act for Hamilton, less about speed and more about stewardship? Could it mark a new chapter, where his impact transcends the cockpit entirely? Public sentiment is overwhelmingly in his favor. Major voices across the sporting landscape have rallied to his side. Celebrities, musicians, actors, and fellow athletes have posted messages of encouragement and admiration. The broader cultural response has been electrifying, with many interpreting his decision as not a retreat, but a reclamation of personal power. Rather than allowing himself to be reshaped into a marketable product, Hamilton has chosen to remain whole, even if it meant breaking away from the most prestigious team in the world. Fans around the globe are feeling a strange mix of loss, confusion, and pride. Some are grieving what might have been, the championship celebrations in red, the image of Hamilton atop the podium at Monza. Others are applauding his refusal to settle, his unyielding devotion to integrity, and his courage to walk away from comfort in pursuit of alignment. Emotional messages are flooding fan pages. Edits are being shared in tribute. F1 discussion boards are engulfed in theories, emotions, and memories of his most iconic moments. Meanwhile, Lewis Hamilton has vanished from the public eye. No interviews. No follow-ups. No clarifications. Just that one message, left like a final chapter. But even in his absence, his presence is everywhere, on every screen, in every conversation, at every level of the sport. This is not just a story about a driver leaving a team. This is about legacy versus compromise. About courage in the face of conformity. About an individual refusing to dilute their essence for the sake of reputation or routine. Hamilton's departure isn't just a loss for Ferrari, it's a reflection of deeper truths in Formula One. That even the most revered institutions can misjudge the soul of a champion. That silence is not the same as harmony. That legacy cannot be bought, it must be lived with truth. And as the paddock buzzes, as reporters chase leads, as fans cry and celebrate all at once, one thing has never been clearer. This is not the end of Lewis Hamilton's impact. It's the beginning of something that goes beyond racing. Beyond trophies. Beyond team colors. This is evolution. And the world is watching, closer than ever before. Ever since Lewis Hamilton announced his move to Ferrari, the world watched with awe, curiosity, and anticipation. The union of a legendary champion and the most storied team in motorsport history seemed destined to produce greatness. Yet, beneath the surface of excitement and hope, something invisible but deeply significant was slowly unraveling. What many believed would be the dawn of a new dynasty quietly evolved into a draining, suffocating chapter in one of the sport's most illustrious careers. The truth, now revealed through Hamilton's raw and unfiltered message, is far more intimate, devastating, and real than anyone could have imagined. From the earliest moments of his time at Maranello, something seemed subtly, but unmistakably, off. The chemistry never fully ignited. The emotional resonance that Hamilton once had with his previous teams felt absent. He was navigating unfamiliar corridors filled with tradition, expectations, and historical weight. The culture that surrounded him was entrenched, inflexible, and deeply set in its ways. Hamilton, a man known for thriving in adaptive, inclusive, and forward-thinking environments, seemed trapped in a place where his voice echoed but wasn't truly heard. Every conversation, every debrief, every interaction felt filtered through layers of protocol and pride, as if he were trying to breathe through glass. This wasn't about tires or downforce or strategy. It was about identity, belonging, and human connection. He wasn't just a driver adjusting to a new car. He was a person trying to find space for his values in an institution that rarely bends. The team, while polished and professional, felt distant and guarded. Decisions were often made behind closed doors, relationships felt transactional, and every gesture of support seemed ceremonial rather than sincere. There was a growing disconnect that no telemetry could measure. For a man who speaks through intuition and emotion, the lack of warmth was louder than any engine. Compounding this sense of isolation was the presence of Charles Leclerc, a driver deeply intertwined with Ferrari's future and image. While their interactions remained civil and respectful on the surface, the dynamic between them was unavoidably lopsided. Leclerc was the chosen one, the symbol of hope, the face of Ferrari's next generation. Hamilton, despite his unmatched pedigree, found himself navigating a team culture that prioritized its existing narrative over welcoming a new one. Feedback was acknowledged, but not absorbed. Experience was respected, but not utilized. His role began to feel more like a guest appearance in someone else's story rather than a shared mission toward victory. As the season progressed, the emotional erosion became more apparent. He was still showing up, still fighting, still pushing, but something inside him was changing. It wasn't about motivation, it was about emptiness. He was giving everything but receiving little in return. There were smiles for the cameras, but behind the scenes, he was fading. The connection that once gave him strength now felt severed. And eventually, the cost became too high. Not in points, but in peace. The statement that shook the world didn't come through a press release or an interview. It came through a few lines posted online, unpolished, sincere, and brutally honest. I felt useless. Not as a driver, but as a person. The words carried a weight that statistics never could. They peeled back the curtain and revealed the raw, painful truth, that even the most celebrated champions can feel unseen, unheard, and unvalued. It wasn't burnout. It wasn't about performance. It was about preservation. His soul was tired, and no championship was worth that. This was not a strategic exit. There was no PR build-up, no farewell choreography, no orchestrated narrative. It was sudden, quiet, and real. And that's what made it hit harder than any podium finish ever could. This wasn't an athlete walking away from competition. It was a man reclaiming his dignity, choosing honesty over obligation, and vulnerability over silence. It was a moment that will redefine how we perceive strength in elite sport. Because real strength isn't always about pushing through pain. Sometimes it's about knowing when to stop before you lose yourself entirely. The racing world is still spinning in the aftermath. Teams are adjusting strategies. Commentators are rewriting storylines. Fans are reeling, caught between heartbreak and admiration. The 2025 season, once so structured and predictable, has been upended completely. Yet amidst the chaos, Hamilton's decision casts a long, illuminating shadow over everything. It forces uncomfortable questions. How many other drivers are silently suffering? How much of the system is built on emotional neglect? How often do we mistake endurance for happiness? Hamilton didn't just step away from a car, he stepped into a deeper truth. One that transcends trophies and statistics. He reminded everyone that mental clarity matters. That emotional health is not a luxury, but a necessity. That even in a world obsessed with results, human beings deserve to feel respected, understood, and safe. His silence at Ferrari spoke louder than any victory celebration. His departure wasn't an ending, it was a message written in the quiet language of self-worth. Long after the engines fall silent and the headlines fade, this moment will endure. Not because of its shock value, but because of its honesty. Hamilton, once again, has become a pioneer, not just in speed, but in spirit. His courage to say, "No more," will echo across generations. Young athletes, seasoned veterans, and fans alike will remember that walking away isn't weakness, it's wisdom. His legacy now stretches far beyond what he did on track. Because the bravest act of all was stepping away before the sport consumed who he truly was.